So a few months ago, I made a video about Dane Cook. I talk about his career, his climb, his stardom, and, all of the reasons that people seem to hate him. And while I was making that video, my own opinion changed back and forth multiple times about whether I was on his side or not. And you can watch that video and make up your own mind about what you think about Dane Cook. But after spending, a month writing that and researching that and buried in Dane Cook, I jumped at the chance to be able to see him live because he hasn't done a tour in a really long time, and he was coming to New York. He was doing one show only at Radio City, which is a big deal for him, and I had to go. I didn't know what I was expecting. I didn't know if I would love it or hate it. I had no idea, and it was kind of fun to go in blind. Radio City is beautiful. You walk in, and there's just this enormous swarm of Dane Cook fans. The theater, if it wasn't sold out, was pretty close to it. It was packed, and I snuck in my little notepad and I took notes during the show, and then on the subway home I wrote a bunch of stuff down. I had a lot of thoughts because it was not what I was expecting in a lot of ways. It was what I hoped it would be in some other ways. I might have a little bit of tea later on, but let's talk about what Dane Cook is up to. The first thing that I noticed right away is that he is a different man. It's been, 20 years since he started to spike, so he has just naturally aged. He's organically slowed down a little bit. His physicality isn't what it used to be. And a lot of the stuff that people don't like about him, that kind of supercharged alpha, high energy, you want to be me, your girl wants to be with me kind of energy, all of that has kind of slowed as he's gotten older and matured, and we've seen this happen with a bunch of other comics. And personally, that stuff was never my favorite. That stuff I always thought was sort of a distraction and not why I was there. So I really preferred this mellow Dane. I think some people who thought he was too much might kind of like a older 50-something. He's not quite 50 yet. Almost 50-something Dane Cook. Where on the other hand, I think a lot of people who loved that kind of fratty energy that he had might go and see him now and say, oh, where's that Dane Cook that I loved? He's just some old guy, right? But I think a lot of people who hate him, I'd be curious to see if you would give him a second chance, what would happen. The second thing that just immediately hit me while I was watching was just, oh my goodness, it is so refreshing to just hear someone tell stories. I didn't, there were no hot takes about Trump. There was none of that. And as someone who sees a lot of New York comedy, it was just kind of refreshing to forget about all of that for a while. And I'm always advocating for silly, fun stand-up and a step back from all of this drama, of which there is so much. So that was a small thing that I really enjoyed. Another thing that I've always really respected about Dane Cook, and this is something that a lot of comedians are really bad at, is that he has always been good at being Dane Cook. And as he's gotten older, when I've seen him, he hasn't sort of pretended to be something that he isn't. Sometimes you see these comedians who are older and super rich and pretty famous, and they try to tell stories like they're just some average guy, and it doesn't work, and it's false premises, and it just kind of feels icky. But Dane Cook is very aware of who he is, and I think that's a really hard thing to do because comedians want to be the underdog so often. So yeah, he lives in a mansion, and he talks about his sprawling property, but he does it in a way that is kind of fun and real, and I like that he's not lying to us or pretending to be something that he isn't. I've always respected that about him. In the same way that he doesn't talk about Trump, he knows who he is, he knows his place, and that's really wonderful. So the one major thought, though, that I was having at this show is that I don't know if the form of stand-up really suits him. And what I mean by that is he is an incredible storyteller. His physicality is wonderful. I think he would make a great circus clown or something because his command over his body is pretty awesome, even at his age. I really like his movements. There's something really wonderful about them. And just he is really good at telling a story. I was thinking to myself that where I would love to hear these types of stories is not necessarily in a stand-up setting on a stage, but if I were at a house party and he was telling this story and this I can just picture this kind of semicircle crowd forming around him and everyone is listening intently and he's and then that's where I want to hear that, and I think people would talk about that forever. But I think in stand-up, people come in with this idea of what a stand-up joke or what a stand-up story is supposed to look and sound like. And I really don't think that does him any favors, because he's so good at telling a story. He's a really great performer, but I do think his weakness has always been in his writing. So if you're looking or waiting for a punchline, I do think you're going to be disappointed. But if you just go in to enjoy a good story, I think you're going to have a good time. So he has these bits that are like 10-minute full adventure stories like he's always done and like other comedians have learned from him. But you reach this place at the end where I think he feels like he has to add some little twist, inversion, punchline at the end. And I do think that's where he's at his weakest, because they're always kind of like, they always kind of fart out at the end. But the story itself is so wonderful. So I would be curious to see what it would look like if he just kind of didn't do that. I know that's really hard because there does feel like there needs to be a button on the end, and frustratingly I'm identifying a problem without identifying any solutions to it, but I do think that is a place where he's getting stuck. In summation, it was really fun to go, and I personally like seeing comedians age and change and mature and watch them try and figure out where they belong in the stand-up world and what they do have to offer. Dane Cook told some just stories about himself starting out his career, stories about like early headshots and first paid gigs, and it just sort of felt like this look back into what his life is, and he talked about some really sweet stuff. There's one or two stories towards the end that felt kind of like reskinned earlier jokes that was kind of disappointing, but I did enjoy it, and I think he is a really wonderful performer, even if he's not a great stand-up. And that distinction, I think, is worth something. That's all. I wanted to do this kind of casual and informal. I have something really exciting coming out soon, and it's about someone who's absorbent and yellow and porous, and I think you guys are going to like it. Yeah, that's all. Bye.